What is happening out there, rotoscouts baseball fans? Welcome to the Friday show, big Friday show, 11 game slate, a lot of action, interesting slate out there. We've got Stephen B out in the chat. We've got Poe DJ and Stoner already here saying wake and bake DFS bitches from Weld County, Colorado. What's going on, guys? My name's Terry McBride. This is the Rotoscouts MLB Lineup Card live show. Going to go game by game, as always, through this 11-gamer. Totally interesting slate. Just kind of killing time until everybody trickles into the chat here, but definitely an interesting slate. There's Lone Wolf. It's Kelvin Dunn. What's going on, guys? Welcome, welcome. I think there's a lot of good pitching options on this one. It's really steep, like up toward a really good peak of two pitchers. Really one guy on my board that I like better than the other guy, but a couple really high-end pitching options and kind of a fat middle. I think there's a lot of playable parts. I think there's a lot of interesting SP2 options on DK. So it's just a fun slate to talk through. It's going to be a good one. Going to try and cruise through it. Let's call it like an hour and a half or so. Try and jump out at like a quarter to six if all things go well. So we've got a little bit of time to build some lineups. There's some interesting tournaments going on out there. Typical tournaments on DK, typical tournaments on FanDuel, but the FanDuel slate's got that couple $100 interesting 50K to first one that's only got a couple hundred entries and 600 total spots. So if you're looking to play a bigger ticket item, I think that's an interesting spot to jump into. Kind of a limited field. A lot of ways to get very different very easily in a 600 entry field. So that's one that's kind of got my eye. I'm trying to decide whether I'm going to do the full 150 or maybe just toss a couple into that one. We'll see what happens. But definitely an interesting slate. Stephen B's in the chat. There's Trey. We've got Larry here. We've got Matt Tomlinson. What's up, Matt? Kevin O. Lone Wolf. Saw Lone Wolf already, I think. Aloysius 5 saying let's go. What's up, Aloysius? I think that's the first time I've noticed an Aloysius in the chat. Welcome. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, get us going with the likes. Remind people throughout the show to do that because I'm terrible at it. I appreciate when you guys jump on the ball there, and I know Larry's really good at that. I know Trey's done that before. Always appreciate the help on stuff like that, guys. But yeah, hopefully we spread the word a little bit. That's all I really ask, for love doing these shows. I'm having a blast writing up the content, creating the content. If you haven't been on the site, it's rotoscouts.com. We've got the home run picks up there. We've got the power index that goes through each team's home run probability. We've also got the stacks board that goes through the projections, the power rankings, the pitcher rankings for all the different teams, ranks them out according to best projections. You can also check out the value numbers, which are point per dollar numbers on there. And then I've got the full article that goes through game by game for everything. So quite a bit out there. Lone Wolf, I appreciate that. Lone Wolf says he's posting in other Discords about the show. Appreciate that, buddy. Larry says Terry's not good at marketing. I am when I really, when I try, or like when it's been my job in the past, like sales and marketing type jobs, I'm actually quite good at it. I just put very little effort into this right now just because I don't really know exactly where it's headed, what I'm doing with it. I'm not like staffing up and building a huge company right now. I'm just kind of forklifting this up myself. Obviously, we're going to need help once basketball and football get rolling, and we'll see what happens there. But right now, everything's free, so it's like, there's a... Dude. Joker's got to chill. Joker's good at marketing. Joker's very loud and aggressive and gets in people's faces. So yeah, I just haven't given it like a huge push. I'd love to have a little bit of time to spend on it too, but yeah, spread the word. You guys are doing a great job of spreading the word. We're building a little bit of a slow burn, and it's fun too. Like we've got our little club over here, and people can find us as they do. I know we had Topher from over at the other place found us the other day, sent me a little tweet saying, "Oh, I wish I had known about this sooner in the season." Chuck says, so you're saying you're not a soulless, greedy, selfish bastard. Yeah, I mean, I told you guys, too, what I was thinking about, like, if I ever do start charging, like, let's say I decide to run projections for football, which are relatively easy, in my opinion, and I think anybody could do it. But if I decide to start running projections, charging for that, maybe basketball projections, too, I was thinking, like, along the lines of, like, $1 a day or less, depending on if you go, like, weekly, monthly, I think I put quarterly was the other one. And I feel like that's affordable. Like that's who I would be trying to market to anyway, is just kind of, and I've talked about this before, is just kind of like the people who aren't 100% like, 150 lineups every time, optimizers, pay for simulators, pay for optimizers, pay for this, pay for that. Like a lot of people just want to put in like the cost of a tournament into, just, all right, I want to be able to access some projections. It's I don't think there's a need to like break people's backs with pricing for this stuff, especially not when it's just me doing it, or like me and maybe I'm tossing a couple people a few bucks to help out or whatever. I don't think we're going to rack up a major overhead, and if we do rack up a major overhead, then obviously we're succeeding. So that'll come along for the ride. Greg, of course you can be in the club. Which club? This club? You're already in this club, buddy. Kevin O. Chuck says, I get charging when you do a bunch of data entry and spend your life for the brand, but some people are quick to charge for their being. Yeah, exactly. Like, if I had something that I thought was ready for prime time in terms of rolling it out and just being utterly confident in every single number without needing to adjust and sit there and nitpick it and worry about things, like I'd roll that out. But like, there are days where you guys see it and we talk about it in the pitching projections a lot of the time, where I'm just like, I don't fully believe in this one. I think we've got one of those today that we'll talk about in a little bit. So, I would only roll out something that I was entirely confident in, and I would spend a lot of time on it. So then I would be okay with like charging for it. For me, just saying like to read my thoughts about a slate, to sit here with me on YouTube, like, I don't know. I'm not a charge for my personality type. Let's put it that way. 20 likes out of 40 listening, which is an awesome percentage. I appreciate that. Let's go the other 20 of you guys. And with that said, let's get it. Yeah, Larry's saying you got to build up first, then go to beta, etc. Yeah, exactly. It's a process. We're just building a little community here. Hopefully everybody's enjoying themselves. Hopefully some guys are finding some success with what we're doing, what we're talking about, and we grow from there. Anyway, let me get my ugly mug off the screen, and we'll jump into this slate. Like I said, there's a lot of interesting pitching in the mid-range. I think two of these guys from this first game are at least somewhat interesting. We've got Alec Marsh going for the Royals, making the fourth start of his career. Over the first 15 innings, 31.8% strikeout rate that was bolstered by a really big performance in his last outing. I'm pulling up his game log over here. The last time out, he struck out 11 Rays in 6 innings, gave up two solo home runs, but struck out 11 in a monster performance. And he's a fairly highly regarded kid. He's not an apex prospect, but he's one of their better prospects, and I think their top pitching prospect overall. 5 innings in the game before that against the Twins, struck out 5, walked 3, struck out 5, walked 4 in his debut. That was against the Dodgers, only lasted 4 innings, gave up 2 homers, gave up 5 earned. He's given up at least 1 home run in each game, 2 home runs in 2 of them. So there are definitely warts with Alec Marsh. And he's a rookie making his debut in Yankee Stadium. Even against the bad Yankees, that does come with some narrative based, that could give you some hiccups, pitching in Yankee Stadium for the first time. He's a high-end kid, though, and he only costs $5,000 on the DK slate. He's got potential against this version of the Yankees lineup. We've got a Yankees lineup that goes Oswald Peraza, Anthony Rizzo, Gleyber Torres, Giancarlo Stanton. That's all fine. Those guys are all playable. But then Franchy Cordero, LeMahieu, Volpe, Billy McKinney, Kyle Higashioka, who's going to do the majority of the catching now because they just put Trevino on the IL. They're going to be without Harrison Bader. He got hit in the back and is going for testing and probably going to go back to the IL. They might end up calling up Esteban Florial. They might end up calling up Pereira, the other top prospect who's performing really well in the outfield. Right now, we're dealing with a lineup that has both Franchy Cordero and Billy McKinney in it. They don't even have like Jake Bowers to stick in there. At least they're not starting IKF. I'll give them that much. There's a little bit of power upside in Franchy Cordero, little bit of power upside in Billy McKinney. He's got 4 on the year and 84 plate appearances. Franchy's got 5 in 64, a 274 ISO, and a pretty decent contact profile here. So it's okay in terms of going to the Yankees, stacking them up against the righty, against a young pitcher who hasn't really proven anything except for the fact that he can give up home runs in games. It's pretty easy to hit home runs in Yankee Stadium. There are several lefties who know how to hit home runs in this lineup, plus Giancarlo Stanton, plus Glaber, who can target those right field seats just as easily as any of the lefties. So there's upside for the Yankees for sure. They're pretty inexpensive across both sites. They've got okay marks in the home run model, but there's definitely upside for Alec Marsh at this price. 7,200 on FanDuel. If he can get me the 6 innings that he got us against the Rays, I mean, he doesn't even need the 11 strikeouts at that price. They're obviously a major, major luxury that would come along with it, but there's upside. There's potential for strikeouts. This confirmed version of the Yankees lineup, 25% strikeout rate on the season. Plenty of potential for strikeouts for this kid. Plenty of potential for 5-6 clean innings. Maybe a shot at a win. It's not a lock that the Yankees are going to win this game by any means, so I think there's room for Alec Marsh on the board, particularly at that 5,000 on DK. That's just cheap. Clark Schmidt on the Yankees side of things, a lot of that kind of applies to him. He projects out a lot better going up against this high strikeout Royals team, but this strikeout rate is not all that much different than this one for these confirmed lineups. Schmidt on the season, 23.3% strikeouts, having a good year, 4.31 ERA, 4.21 xFIP. They're letting him pitch a little bit deeper into games. He's worked into the fifth plus a lot of times in recent starts. 94 innings in 19 starts overall. Hasn't been bad in terms of allowing power. 3.44% home runs is higher than you'd like, but some of those games in Yankee Stadium, you can forgive some of those home runs. 43.9% hard hits is a little high. 90.7 miles an hour of exit velo is a little high, but good on the walk rate. Decent on the strike throwing numbers. So I think there's enough upside for Clark Schmidt here too with this Royals lineup that's been so bad, that hasn't created runs. They're second worst in the league, I believe, against right-handed pitching, with this Yankees active roster as the worst team in the league against right-handed pitching for run creation, by the way, when we were looking at splits earlier. So these are just two bad baseball teams right now. I think there's upside for both pitchers. I prefer the Yankees bats. Just in a total vacuum, no fanhood involved there, just because the Royals have been just demonstrably worse and just have a lower ceiling overall, I think. Bobby Witt's an excellent player. Sal Perez is a major source of power as a catcher. MJ Melendez should be better, but isn't, as I've talked about. Nick Pratto, I believe, has a good bat, but strikes out way too much, gives a lot of upside to Clark Schmidt. There's a ton of guys in that lineup that are really flawed hitters, so I much prefer the Yankees lineup, but I do think you can play the Royals. Take Michael Garcia off the top of the lineup, put him together with Bobby Witt, Sal Perez, and MJ. Just straight line that top end. Or you could go like, Witt, Perez, MJ, Olivares, Prado. Waters, if you wanted to, is okay, given a 13.8% barrel rate over 149. It's not good. 85 WRC plus, a 145 ISO, hasn't turned into anything, but at least that's sturdy contact. And there's a couple of those guys in the lineup, like some 40% hard hits, some good barrel rates. Melendez is the one I talk about all the time. 11.5% barrels, 51.8% hard hits, but somehow only 7 home runs and a 133 ISO and 373 plate appearances. Really, really disappointing season from him so far. So this one's value both pitchers. I think you can play both pitchers on both sites at extreme value numbers. And then I think you play a little bit of both lineups. Greatly prefer the Yankees side of it. Nice value prices on those guys. If I'm rostering Yanks, I like going to Oswald Peraza off the top. Multi-position on both sites. Only 2,300 on FanDuel. I talked about him, I think yesterday, maybe the day before, where he's a very high-end prospect for them as well. He was coming up right alongside Volpe. It was a discussion about which one was going to get the job first, and how they were going to arrive together. And he seems like he's kind of entrenched right now. He's getting that leadoff spot a lot. He's got multi-position on both sites, 3 positions on FanDuel. That's a value bet ahead of Rizzo, ahead of Torres, ahead of Stanton. And then you mix in the Corderos. My favorite options from the end are the 2 lefties, Cordero and Billy McKinney. And then, any shares of these guys are fine, but they've all been kind of low end this year. Volpe's got 13 homers, 16 stolen bases, does provide counting stats from time to time, and is cheap at shortstop, but he's wildly inconsistent. Higgy's got this great contact profile that we talk about a lot. 11.9% barrels, 49.5% hard hits. That's great. Only 5 home runs, 162 plate appearances. So it's really the top 4, and then mix and match your way through these other guys. Jump to this one. Alex Wood, Jake Irvin. This is the pitching projection that I referred to that I don't really buy. 25.1, just a little bit high on the FanDuel board. I would prefer Alex Wood in this matchup, even as a lefty going up against the frisky Nationals against the lefty. I just think Alex Wood is a better pitcher than Jake Irvin. Jake Irvin hasn't done really anything. I'm not entirely sure why this is coming through even this high in the model. He wasn't getting like an extreme innings projection, or I'm not really sure where that comes from. I didn't really have time to take a look. But Irvin so far this season, 15.9% strikeouts, 10.5% barrels, a 5.66 xFIP, a 4.96 ERA. Like I said in the article, I think you can just fire away at him with Giants bats and just kind of leave him by the wayside. It would surprise me if he had a day in line with this projection, which suggests like, mid-board production, 20s into the 30s on FanDuel. I just don't buy it. The price is great. If he was realistic to do that, the price is great. He's just not been that guy at all and doesn't really profile as that guy. So I don't love it against the Giants lineup that I do like getting to day to day, that I do think has several very productive hitters with the lefty power between Peterson, Yastrzemski, and Conforto, as well as Blake Sable. Honestly, he's been pretty productive at the plate. 11 home runs in 241 plate appearances, 12.8% barrels, 41.1% hard hits. Sable's a good little bat lurking late in the lineup there. And then they've got the good righties. They've got Wilmer. They've got Pat Bailey. They've got J.D. Davis. Bailey's a switch hitter. They've got J.D. Davis in the lineup. So I like this lineup at least like 1 through 7. You mix and match the Brett Wiseleys and Casey Schmitz of the world. But I think you could definitely take shots at Irvin here. I'm not really worried about him. And then Alex Wood on the other side, like I said, I prefer him head-to-head between these two pitchers. And I do think he's on the board for SP2 shares at 6,000 on DK. If you're building a super premium lineup, let's say you wanted to put like, Braves and somebody together on the FanDuel slate, or like a high-cost Reds lineup or something along those lines, Alex Wood is probably in play on FanDuel at 6,700. Just given the talent that he's displayed over time. 20.6% strikeouts this year, 11.5% walks is way too high. The strikeouts are down. But last year was 23.6% strikeouts and 130 2/3. Ugly ERA, but a really good xFIP. Year before, 26% strikeouts, a decent ERA, a very good xFIP. Doesn't walk too many in previous seasons, so there's been an issue with the walks this year. The whip is obviously way high. Little bit of premium contact, 42.8% hard hits, 90.7 miles an hour of exit velo, but only 2.47% home runs. The years past, good at limiting launch angle, good at limiting barrels, limiting home runs. So I kind of like the upside for Wood, just because the Nationals... They are better against lefties, like we've talked about a bunch of times. Joker, go lie down, buddy. Come on, we've got a ways to go, buddy. Go lie down. Dinner time's later. So the Nationals are good against lefties. They're better against lefties. They have a 108 WRC plus in the split, and they've been productive. Several guys who were super productive in the split against lefties. But I think Wood's talented enough on the right night. He can pitch his way to value at that number. That's not an overly costly number to take some shots at the Nationals here. So a little bit of Alex Wood for value on both sides. No real interest in Irvin, despite how he looks in the model. Maybe I take 1 or 2 shots at it just because it's 6,200. That's an even more extreme savings from Wood. So maybe 1 or 2 shots at it, but I really don't trust that number. Nationals bats, if you're going to them, C.J. Abrams kind of pulling it together against lefties, at least in the last couple of games. We had talked before about how same-handed pitching matchups had been brutal for him on the season. He's up to a 92 WRC plus overall, 18 stolen bases, 8 home runs. Is a kid with a good track record as a prospect. Was a kid who was expected to hit, so wasn't totally shocked to see him continue to pull things together up there, and it's a great spot in the lineup. So if you're rostering Nationals, you could probably include C.J. Abrams against, let's face it, a middling kind of a lefty in Alex Wood, and then you go Lane Thomas. Heimer Candelario has 3 of his 15 home runs now against lefties. He's been mediocre against lefties, but good overall and definitely playable in this spot at 38-32 if you're going to Nationals. Meneses has been better righty-lefty. Keibert Ruiz has been a little bit better righty-lefty and has significant power upside. He's got a 393 slugging percentage and a high 4s expected slugging. Expected is 458, so mid-4s. So cheap catcher power in Keibert Ruiz. I think there's plenty of upside there. Stone Garrett has been pretty productive against lefties. 6 home runs overall, a 105 WRC plus. Against lefties, I don't appear to have put it in. Oh, I thought I put his splits in the article. I was going to read it directly out of that. Alex Call against lefties, 118 WRC plus with a 165 ISO and 101 opportunities against lefties. So Alex Call down at the bottom of the lineup is interesting. Luis Garcia, not a pitcher, doesn't cost 9,200. I forgot to change that. Mix and match type of a player. Michael Chavis from the bottom of the lineup, second and third base on DK, 3 positions on FanDuel, 2,000 and 2,100 across sites. Has been good in spots in his career, and it's been a short and limited and weird career for him, but has been good against lefties throughout his career in spots. This year, let me pull him up because I didn't have him in the projected. Joker's excited that Michael Chavis is in the lineup. This year against lefties, we're talking about 40 plate appearances, 1 home run, 263, 282, 368 with a 105 ISO and a 74 WRC plus. For his career, 22 home runs in 440 plate appearances against lefties, 19 in 704 against righties. So a much better power hitter against lefties than he is against righties. All of this is in the vacuum of than he is against righties, but does have a career 201 ISO against left-handed pitching, 239, 269, 440. It's not great, but there's a little bit of pop in Michael Chavis' bat for the dead minimum on DK, 2 positions, and 3 positions on FanDuel at 2,100. If you're going to Nationals, I would include Michael Chavis. It's basically a 1 through 7. Actually, no, it's 1 through 7 plus 9, really, because Alex Call's pretty good against lefties. So it's definitely an opportunity. It's been a spot where people have been going and succeeding. They're very, very cheap. They're a good value option here. But we are still going to a bad team overall, just in the good side of their splits where they've been a little bit productive. So bear in mind the players that you're rostering when we go to this. But they're at the correct prices. It's not like anybody's expensive. So that one was value bats on either side. Kind of like the Giants a little bit. Nationals are okay because it's a lefty. And then some Alex Wood. Don't really believe in Jake Irvin. Check out what's happening in the chat real quick. Greg says he's a little worried about the opportunity cost of paying down at pitcher tonight. Any of the top guys can destroy the slate, especially on FanDuel. I totally agree with that. The top end, this is a top-heavy slate. We'll look at the pitching board in a little bit, but no spoilers. It's Framber Valdez, it's Shohei Ohtani, it's Joe Ryan up at the top of my board. Those guys are expensive and totally worthwhile. They'll make up a lot of the ownership on the slate, though, and there's a lot of the slates that we've seen, there have been a lot of competitive scores where a $7,000, $8,000 pitcher on FanDuel has a good enough day that it floats a lineup just based on what's in the hitting. So it all depends on, the opportunity cost that you sacrifice at pitcher can easily be made up by a double and a couple of RBIs from one guy in a batting order that you can now access in combination with another high-end batting order that otherwise are inaccessible. So opportunity cost just in a pitcher vacuum is... It's important, and it's important to think about, but there is a limitation to that in that the hitting can always catch up to the pitching. The hitting can always exceed pitching. Pitching, like even in a game where what would the max? There's a maximum possible total for a pitcher, I guess is what I'm trying to say. In the unrealistic sense that a guy went out and had this Steve Nebraska game from the movie The Scout, 81 pitches, all of them strikes, 27 up, 27 down, 27 strikeouts, perfect game. I don't know what that calculates to in a fantasy score, but it's probably around 100 and change. So a pitcher does have a capped ceiling for what he could possibly do in a game, where a hitter technically does not. So you can always make up ground with hitting. Mouse is acting up again. I feel like maybe there's something on my network that interferes with it, or something like electronically in this room interferes with the signal between the wireless mouse and the little USB guy. Too bad Nebraska didn't get points for his home run as well. Yeah, they had him on the Shohei Ohtani plan. Shohei Ohtani is literally is Steve Nebraska this season. Marsh throwing a perfect game tonight versus the Yankees. Hey, it could definitely happen. Wouldn't totally shock me. I mean, it would be pretty damn amazing and pretty shocking, but I mean, a very, very good game from that kid would not shock me at all. Mets and the Red Sox. This one's projecting 4 hitting on both sides. I'm seeing a lot of power here against Cutter Crawford. 3.66% home run rate on the season, 8.6% barrels, only 35.8% hard hits. Not filthy for hard hits, not bad in terms of runs. 3.74 ERA, a 4.14 xFIP, 24.5% strikeouts is good. Walk rate is good, but the Mets are flashing some power upside. Look at some of these power numbers. Nimmo's good, Lindor's good, Pete Alonso's good, Francisco Alvarez. Even Dan Vogelbach hiding in there. Not a great number in the home run model, but 2,300 on both sites. It sucks that you have to decide between him and Alonso at first base on the DK slate. You could play both of them if you want to on FanDuel. A lot of multi-position in these guys on the FanDuel slate, although one of those guys is Luis Guillorme, who we talked about yesterday. Kind of a defense-only kind of a player. And moderately okay hit tool, can put the ball in play from time to time. Not a guy to completely leave out, but if I'm building like 15 Met stacks, he's probably only in like 2 of them, maybe a few more just because of the very cheap price and the positional flex. If I'm just saying, hey, take a fourth man no matter who he is, big slate, I want to build full stacks. That's how we would get into a few more of the lineups, but very low priority for Guillorme at the bottom of the lineup. Crawford is not entirely unplayable in my mind. He doesn't project well at all. I'm not entirely sure where this is coming from either. Some interesting things coming through the model this year. He's been up and down for the season, but overall the numbers are pretty good. 5,500, 6,900. Unless I miss something in not doing a deep dive, which I can pull them up real quick. Yeah, 6 innings, 4 innings, 5 2/3, giving up. He's been on a run of giving up like 4 earned runs, 3 earned runs, only striking out small pockets of hitters. He hasn't been great, but struck out 9 in his last game in 6 innings, allowed 1 hit, walked 4 against the Cubs at Wrigley. It's not a bad game. So I think Crawford's got ability. For 5,500 on DK, I think he's certainly on the SP2 board. I don't know if I would go to him on FanDuel, just kind of how deep the slate is in terms of similar pitching options at that price, and then the premium pitching options that we just referred to before. So given how he projects for me, I don't think I need him on FanDuel. Senga on the other side, pricey option, doesn't really project well either. 9,600, 10-4 in Fenway Park. 30% strikeout rate for him this year is great, but he's one of those like effectively wild guys. I've talked a couple times about that splitter that just dies in the dirt, but sometimes it only goes like 57 feet and just dies like well ahead of the plate. It's just taken for a ball over and over again. He's been effective though. 3.20 ERA, 3.70 xFIP, a 2.70% home run rate, 6% barrels. I mentioned the 30% strikeouts, but 12% walks. But on top of that, 12.3% swinging strikes. So he's got the ability to induce strikeouts, get himself out of trouble. He's had his clunker performances. He's had his games where he's given up too many runs, but then kind of made it back with strikeouts. 95 2/3 in 17 starts gives you okay shot at the quality start. I just don't love the spot tackling the Red Sox in Fenway Park with a pitcher that's going to give them that much opportunity when they've got several guys at the top of the lineup that are really respectable for on-base percentage, for drawing walks. Plus a guy like Tristan Casas, for all his flaws, 13.9% walk rate leads that team this year. 339 on base overall, but that's an excellent walk rate from the power hitter. So he can probably sit there, wait for his pitch, try and draw the walk, or otherwise if he sees one that he can square up, just try and tee off on it. I like the spot for Casas. I like the Red Sox today. Top to bottom, really. I think Connor Wong and Yu Chang are playable parts at catcher and shortstop. Third base on FanDuel. They're very, very cheap at the bottom. Even Casas is very cheap. For a guy with a 13.4% barrel rate, 45.5% hard hits, 2,900 at first base, 2,800 on FanDuel at first base, a high strikeout rate, but not a awful 35%er, and all those walks. That's a good player. This kid is coming around. I've been calling for the big second half. I think this is a good spot. I really do. Duvall, I like him, righty for very cheap prices, 4,400, 3,100 with all his power upside, 7 home runs in 145 plate appearances, a 266 ISO, and just sustainable power over time. Rafael Devers, fantastic contact profile, limited in terms of the triple slash this year, but the power's there, 23 home runs, 259 ISO. And then these 3 guys that I referred to before are all just good at getting themselves on base. The average on base for those guys is 366. Their average run creation mark is 133. Their average batting average, 306. That's just a good trio with Jarren Duran, Justin Turner, and Yoshida up at the top of the board there. So I like this Red Sox lineup. I was getting to them a little bit in early looks at lineups. They're in my placeholder lineup right now that I kind of like. So I like this spot. They're pricey on the top end, but very cheap through the bottom. So they're kind of a good option to put together with some of the more expensive teams out there. The Mets, if I'm going there, it's Nimmo, it's Lindor, and it's Alonso as the priority, and then Francisco Alvarez along for the ride with that. 3,900 is very cheap for him on DK. Where you need a catcher, that's a great buy. 13.3% barrels, 43.6% hard hits, 19 homers on the season, a 283 ISO. Kid should be more expensive by now. Come on, DraftKings. I know he's a 243 hitter, but who cares? With all that power, who cares? Brett Beatty, very good left-handed bat, 45.5% hard hit rate, 7 home runs on the season. Only 126 ISO, just kind of hiding down the bottom of the lineup. But a bat I believe is going to come around as well. So I like that spot, 2,826. Kana is a playable veteran, but it's really all about, can Alonso turn his season around? Can he square one up? Nice 16.39, one of the day leaders in the home run model. I didn't realize we were all the way scrolled over there. Petey's number 2 in the home run model. Mookie, Muncy, look at all those Dodgers. Whew, big day for the Dodgers. So the Mets are on the board too. Top end of the lineup. I hate Jeff McNeil hitting third, but he's there. He's a table setter. Hopefully you get Nimmo on or the solo home run followed by a solo shot from Francisco Lindor, or he drives in Nimmo, and then McNeil resets the table 3 times over and over again for Pete Alonso or Francisco Alvarez, who then deliver. That's what you're looking for from McNeil in the 3 spot. He's a playable part. He's cheap. He's easy to put into a lineup, offsets position, offsets price. So I don't worry about Jeff McNeil there, but I don't love him. I don't prioritize him really over the power bats. So this one's playable Cutter Crawford, particularly on DK. Playable Kodai Senga for high prices, probably very low ownership, but I don't like the spot. Not against the Red Sox here. Not in this ballpark. And then definitely like mid-range, mid-priority type of ownership on both stacks. Phillies, Guardians. I think we could take pitching on both sides of this one. I'll draw some Philly stacks for sure. Specifically the top end, but it's a lineup that I talk about a lot that I like, basically 1 through 9 a lot of days. Today, more 1 through 8, given that it's Jake Cave hitting 9th, but he's not completely inept at the plate, and he only costs the dead minimum on FanDuel. So if I'm building more than 2 or 3 Phillies lineups, he's probably in at least one of them. But really the priorities for the Phillies, Kyle Schwarber, Trey Turner, Nick Castellanos, Bryce Harper, not breaking any ground there. I really like Stott, Bohm, and Brandon Marsh from the bottom of the lineup. All 3 of these guys are hyper productive this year. Average batting average for those 3 guys is 288. Average on base, 342. Average WRC plus 109 for 3 guys that cost this little. Play a couple different positions at the bottom of the lineup. Those are 3 very productive hitters. What I don't like about the spot for the Phillies is that they're going up against Gavin Williams, a pitcher that I really like, that I really believe in. Young kid, pitching prospect, making his 6th start in the majors. 19.2% strikeout rate so far. 29 2/3 innings. Walked 9.2%. That's too many. 3.94 ERA is okay, but a 4.80 xFIP is not acceptable yet from him. But we're going to get better. This is a kid with premium stuff. Plus fastball. Plus breaking stuff. Just going to his game log as I talk about him here. So far, we're at a strikeout high of 7. That came against the Royals. He also had a 6 strikeout game against the Royals. His other starts were against the Athletics in his debut. 4 strikeouts, but gave up 4 earned runs, walked 3 in 5 2/3. Went 7 in that first Royals game. Then he went 6 1/3 against Atlanta. Gave up 4 earned runs, 3 home runs, 2 strikeouts. But the important thing in that game, in my mind, is that he went 6 1/3. 5 2/3 in the next start against the Royals. That was the 7 strikeout game. And then faced the Rangers at Texas. Went 5 innings, gave up 2 earned, walked 4, struck out 4. So the results have been a little mixed, but the games where it's been a little mixed, he's been challenged by really, really good teams. The Phillies are probably between that, between those levels of teams. I don't think they're as elite as the Rangers and the Braves, but they're a very good baseball team overall. They've got a lot of very good hitters top to bottom. So it's not a great spot for Gavin Williams, but he projects out perfectly fine, and I do believe there's more strikeouts to come from him. And there's enough strikeouts in this Phillies lineup between Kyle Schwarber at 29.7, Nick Castellanos, who's having a great year, at 26, Realmuto at 25, Brandon Marsh at 31.3 is a target down there. I think there's strikeout potential for Gavin Williams. 7,000 on DK, 8,500 on FanDuel. I can't imagine he's going to be all that popular. So I like him as an SP2 option on DK. If I'm going to those other shitty pitchers, I'm happy to go to shares of Gavin Williams for a little bit more in a similar kind of a matchup with a probably bigger ceiling. 8,500 on FanDuel, I'm happy to pay that price for him as well. On the other side, Ranger Suarez going up against this Guardians lineup, there's definitely upside for him. 21.5% strikeout rate this year, a 3.84 ERA, a 4.06 xFIP, has been pitching really well this season. Not really racking up strikeouts, but he doesn't allow a ton of power, only 2.43% home runs this year. Cuts launch angle, which is something that we always target. 7.5 degree average launch angle this year, 5.1 the year before, 4.4 the year before that. No barrels to speak of, very few home runs. He's a better than advertised pitcher on a lot of days. Matchups based specifically, going up against the Guardians, they don't strike out. Like we've talked about many times when we're targeting this team, they don't strike out and they're getting a little bit better. A lot of their hitters seem to be coming around a little bit. So maybe the sequencing comes around. Maybe they're BABIPing him to death and hitting ground balls through the middle instead of at players tonight. Maybe they rack up a few runs. But Suarez has the upside to cut through the home run potential for this team and rack up some good innings here. So I like the spot for him. 8,000 on DK, 8,800 on the FanDuel slate. Projects out okay, kind of a mid-board projection. Not a spot to get overexposed to, but a handful of shares is perfectly fine for him. Guardians lineup, like I mentioned, kind of maybe showing a little bit of life. Josh Bell up to 11 home runs, 161 ISO, pulled himself above the waterline for run creation so far. David Fry, kind of a non-entity, 63 plate appearances so far, a 109 WRC plus, but not a great fantasy asset, but playable part at 2,300, 2,200 in the middle of the lineup. Andres Jimenez, 97 WRC plus, has been disappointing overall, but does have 8 home runs, 15 stolen bases. So if we look to a guy like Anthony Volpe because he gets counting stats infrequently, we could definitely look to a guy like Andres Jimenez, who had that profile a couple of years ago as a prospect, was expected to be in at least the mid-teens to 20s for home runs this year, and same for stolen bases. Last year, 17 homers, 20 stolen bases, and a 140 WRC plus. This guy's just been gone for most of the season. The hit tool's vanished, down 50 points in the hit tool, down 50 points in the on base. So obviously, way down in the WRC plus as well. If he comes around, it's a big boost to that lineup, though. Same for Ahmed Rosario up at the top of the lineup. 4,200, 2,800 for him. His double play partner, 3,800, 2,800. They're both really affordable. So if I'm stacking Guardians, my priorities, obviously, Jose Ramirez and Josh Naylor. I don't think I'm surprising anyone there. And then probably Josh Bell if I'm on DK and I can get there. Well, I can't get both Naylor and Bell in the lineup. So it would be Naylor over Bell. But if you need to save $3,000, if you need to save $1,000 and drop down to that 3,000 price for Josh Bell, I don't mind making that decision over Josh Naylor, especially if he's going to come around a little bit. And you look at some of the underlying numbers, 44.6% hard hits versus 43.3, 10% barrel rate versus 9.7. Josh Bell's a guy who hit 27 home runs 2 years ago, hit high teens last year, 17 last year. So, I mean, it's not like I don't trust him just as much as I trust Josh Naylor. So if you need to save the 1,000, that's an easy decision to make. And then what I was getting to was Jimenez and Rosario would be my next priorities there, over a guy like Steven Kwan, over David Fry, Miles Straw, Gabriel Arias. Those guys are all just kind of mix and match bolt-on pieces. Kwan is good given his spot in the batting order. He's up to a 99 WRC plus, 15 steals, but only 269, 343, 366. Still down like 30 some odd points in on base, and that's his crucial skill. He's just got to get on. He's not a 0.9% barrel rate this year, 19.5% hard hits. Last year was 1.4 and 20.8. He just doesn't strike out, puts the ball in play a good amount, knows how to draw a walk. When he's going right, he's an asset. So you build him into the top of stacks, but I prioritize the power speed combo that Rosario and Jimenez give you for very cheap prices at key positions too, shortstop and second base. So yes to some fills, yes to a few Guardian stacks, but not many. Enthusiastic about Gavin Williams, more enthusiastic about Ranger Suarez. I like the pitching on both sides in this one as like your mid-range, priced appropriately type options. Not saying these guys are your slate leaders, but they're both on the board for some shares. These guys are not on the board for shares. Neither one of these guys is a pitching priority for me. I see no real reason to go to Ben Lively, a guy I've used a few different times this year, but just the ballpark conditions in Cincinnati tonight, highest run total on the board. Good team on the other side that limits strikeouts, that obviously has racked up big scores against much, much better pitchers than Ben Lively. Lively's a guy, he's, I think, young 30s, pitched overseas for a couple of years, just made his way back to the show. Having a good year, 3.72 ERA, a 4.22 xFIP, 22.7% strikeouts. He's given up a lot of power, which was what I thought we were just going to be, he was going to be a home run target and not do anything else. These numbers are respectable. The ERA, the xFIP, the walk rate, the strikeout rate, especially the ERA and the xFIP, given the 4.72 home run rate, 8.6% barrels. The hard hits aren't terrible. Launch angles, mid-range. So in other spots, he's been playable because he only costs around here. I just don't think with the Diamondbacks in town in this ballpark that we need to tangle with it. And then Tommy Henry's been a guy I've been targeting with bats through most of the season. For better and worse, there have been spots where it's burnt me. There have been spots where he hasn't been terrible. He's even put up a couple serviceable DFS games this year. I'm just not seeing against these frisky Reds. I think a lot of people are going to be going to the Reds today. McLean was my home run pick for the day, 10.49 in the model, and you can see how many guys are over the 10 mark in the home run model here. So just a lot of power always comes through against Tommy Henry. I didn't realize exactly how chalky McLean was going to be. He's one of the more highly projected ownership spots on the entire slate on FanDuel and the ownership projections that I looked at across town on Grinders. So I do think that a lot of people are going to Reds, but I think it's totally justified. What I love about this lineup, in addition to just having all the talent in the world, look at all these multi-position guys at the top of the lineup, and then specifically in like different spots across the infield where you can move them around, put them in different combinations with one another, and then grab different things from later in their lineup or just different things from other teams. They just work really well with a lot of different combinations, given the outfield, the corners eligibility, the middle infield eligibility across those guys. I do include Nick Senzel in that, 3,500, 2,700. It's not like he's expensive. He helps pay for the other guys in the lineup. He's got 7 homers, 4 stolen bases on the season, only an 82 WRC+. But he is a guy that he was completely derailed by injuries and then lost opportunities over time and never really landed at the major league level. 5 homers, 8 stolen bases last year and 420 opportunities. This is one of his bigger opportunity seasons and didn't do anything with it. But there is talent there. There is a guy who was once one of the highest regarded prospects in all of baseball. So I'll go to Nick Senzel in that spot in this lineup at those prices with that positional flexibility. Elly De La Cruz, obviously a star, super expensive, 6,500, 4,000. At this point, it is fair to say I think that maybe that's a major tax for just being Elly De La Cruz right now. I love the positional flex that they give him between third and shortstop, but we are talking about a rookie with a 30.9% strikeout rate, 279, 321, 442, a 99 WRC+. He's stolen 17 bases in only 165 plate appearances. He's hit 4 home runs. You guys know I think he's going to be a superstar, but we're already paying superstar prices. It might be a little bit of a tax, but hopefully that keeps his ownership a little lower than maybe it should be, and maybe as compared to like McLean, Spencer Steer, Jonathan India, maybe people go to those 3 guys a little bit more than they should, or a little bit more than the Elly shares that they should be filling in. So just find a way to pay for him. McLean, like I said, home run pick for the day, 8 on the season, 7 stolen bases, a 209 ISO, 129 WRC+. Premium rookie that they called up first out of these guys. Encarnacion Strand down the bottom of the lineup. I fixed his name, so now that it pops up without me having to go fix it every time. Only 3,000, 2,800. 20 home runs in AAA already, plus a home run at the major league level. 308, 538 over his first 13 plate appearances. Has been involved in the offense since he got here. Premium bat for only 3,000, 2,800. First base on DK. That kind of sucks because you got to decide between him and Joey Votto. FanDuel, you get him at third base with Joey at first base. So you can play them both. You could play them both even if they were both first basemen, obviously. And with all the positional flex, it just helps to get them at different spots too. Stevenson and Will Benson. Will Benson's a really exciting player. I was watching some highlights of the Reds game yesterday, and just some of the stuff he does out in the field, just good arm out in the field. They made a great play, him and Elly, to throw somebody out at home plate. He picked the ball up out by the wall, fired a laser beam to Elly, and then Elly just rifled one home. Didn't make the greatest throw in the world. Like, it was a really hard throw, really got the ball there really quick and effectively. But he was actually like up the first baseline a little bit. Catcher made a really good play. I don't know if it was, I think it was Malley. Made a really good play to grab the ball and get back in time for the tag. But it was just a dynamite relay. Point being, Will Benson's a good athlete. 289, 389, 526, having a very good season. 6 home runs, 9 stolen bases, a 141 WRC plus. Does a lot on the field for 2,800, 2,900. So Benson's in my plans with the Reds. This lineup runs 1 through 9 for me. I kind of skipped over Jonathan India, Spencer Steer in the lineup there, but both of those guys are dynamite. Joey's dynamite for these cheap prices. Both sites, affordable on FanDuel rather than cheap. Probably cheap applies on the DK slate a little bit more. Good home run potential from all those guys. Stolen bases from everybody except for Votto. Run creation. Just a really good spot for the Reds. Diamondback side going up against Lively. Definitely want some of this as well. Geraldo Perdomo off the top. Good on base percentage for him. Good run creation marks this season. If he continues this on base and some run creation, a little bit of hit tool, and even adds some stolen base upside, that's a nice little player to have up there. He was a premium prospect. Went completely bust in his rookie year last year, then had the hot start this year. Now he's just kind of cooled into like a maybe hit tool, speed, and on-base guy, which is perfectly fine. It's actually kind of what they need up at the top of this lineup. That lets Marte slide down to the 2 spot. He's got 15 home runs. He's better as like a power drive guys in kind of a player. 358 on base. Still very good at getting on base. Very good at limiting strikeouts, putting the ball in play, knows how to draw a walk. But Perdomo, 13.6% walk rate with only a 15.6% strikeout rate. That's fantastic. So I really like those 2 hitters. Corbin Carroll turned himself into a star this season. 19 home runs, 29 stolen bases, a 140 WRC plus. Just a dynamite year. Christian Walker I talk about a lot. I love his low strikeout rate combined with all his power at the plate. Same thing with Lourdes Gurriel. 15 homers for him, only a 16.7% strikeout rate. 263, 314, 480, a 111 WRC plus, a 217 ISO. Jake McCarthy, Gabriel Moreno, Alec Thomas. Oh, I skipped over Evan Longoria. Longo's got a team-leading 13.3% barrel rate, 57.1% hard hits. Major upside for home run potential, 3,400, 2,700 at third base. Just a guy you can stick into the lineup if he plays today. McCarthy, Moreno, and Alec Thomas, playable parts. They do different things at the plates. McCarthy's got a ton of speed. Thomas has like moderate power, moderate speed. He can steal a base. Moreno, same story, moderate power, moderate speed, but a better hit tool and a catcher for very cheap. So good playable parts down the bottom of the Diamondbacks lineup. Priorities are 2 through 6. Perdomo's my favorite bolt-on, but enthusiasm about bats on both sides. No real need for pitchers on either side. If you had to roster a pitcher from this game, it's probably Ben Lively, but I hate it. I do not want it. Dodgers against the Rangers. Dodgers flashing all that power in the home run model because they're facing Andrew Heaney. Jekyll and Hyde. Bodija and Stoner says Benson fire. Yeah, I love that. Love that Benson spot. Chuck says you got to include him. I agree. Extreme pitchers umpire in New York and Boston. Just in case someone doesn't know what that means, it means they call more strikes and less balls. They cause lower ERAs and are positive to the pitcher, says Chuck. I don't really follow umpires. Not that I don't think there's value in that. It's just one more thing that I don't necessarily know how to exactly quantify. Almost. I have a cup of coffee and as I was saying that, the top popped off as I was about to tip it up to my face. That could have been disastrous. So I don't have anything quantifying the umpires, but it's always worth mentioning, always worth talking about. Umpires have tendencies for sure. So, and some of them are just demonstrably bad for sure. Shannon says, damn, I look on Grindr site and didn't notice the start time. Start time for what? Are you talking about the 6:40, the early slate? Scared me there for a second. I was like, wait a minute, do I have less time than I thought? Dodgers lineup's outlier? Let me see. Good call. Let's grab that. So Heaney, he's a difficult pitcher. He always has home run issues. 4.30% home run rate this year, 4.52 last year, 5.20 the year before. He's kind of like Kikuchi. Like, you always know he's targetable for home run upside, but he's better than Kikuchi in terms of what he's done over the course of his career. Last year, 35.5% strikeouts, a 3.1 ERA, a 2.83 xFIP in 72 and 2/3 over 14 starts. Year before, in a little bit more of a complete sample, 23 starts, 129 and 2/3 innings, 26.9% strikeouts. ERA was too high. The xFIP was okay. Way too many home runs, obviously. but a good strikeout pitcher when he's on. We know Heaney can give us those big games when he's on. I just don't think that comes against these Dodgers. We've been kind of ducking around the Dodgers in a lot of these spots that we've talked about recently with some pretty good pitchers in like a, I don't know that I need to go there kind of a spot, even when the Dodgers aren't showing all these guys with double-digit marks in the home run model. So, like, why do we want to really go to a homer-prone pitcher when they are showing all those home run marks and still have that low strikeout acumen on their side? So, don't really like the spot for Heaney. Doesn't really project well in the model. Certainly wouldn't floor me if he went out, had an okay game over 6 innings, gave up a couple of runs on a home run to one of these guys, but still struck out 8 or 9. It wouldn't shock me. It just doesn't seem within the most realistic, wave of probability there. And that's really where we've got to look. So I'm looking for probability, not possibility. And with that in mind, I'm going to probably wave off most of the Heaney shares. Maybe 1 or 2 trickle in, but it won't be much exposure at all. Other side of the game, Tony Gonsolin, kind of the same story with much more limited strikeout potential. I just don't want to tangle with the Rangers, really, with a guy who only has an 18.9% strikeout rate, who puts too many on base at 9%, 5.02 on the xFIP. The ERA is good. That might lead some people to put him in at cheap pricing, even against the Rangers, but I don't know. Kind of limited to me. Pushing a 3% home run rate, 88.9 miles an hour of exit velo is okay, 37% hard hits, all that's fine. But the xFIP is higher than the ERA by a fairly significant margin here. He doesn't really throw many strikes, doesn't induce a great strikeout rate, puts too many guys on base. I don't love the spot for Gonsolin here. Against the worst team, fine. You could, if he was facing the Yankees, to throw a clunky example, then sure, fire away. But against the Rangers, like, why do it to yourself? I just don't see it. So Marcus Semien, Corey Seager, Nathaniel Lowe, Adolis Garcia, Josh Young, Jonah Heim, Travis Jankowski, Ezekiel Duran, Leody Taveras. You can fire away 1 through 9 as usual with the Rangers. They come up in the, I want to say like the middle of the board. Yeah, 11th overall by projection. So they're not like blowing away the field in my model here either. Only 16th by home run upside. But they're just a very good team on any given slate sense. It's definitely a team that I at least want to have in my portfolio of lineups. And they're actually fairly easily affordable, especially on FanDuel. With all these guys now in the mid-3s, 41 obviously for Adolis Garcia, 43 for Corey Seager. Those are obviously premiums. But you get Semien at a bit of a discount from where he's been all season. Nathaniel Lowe is very cheap. Josh Young and Jonah Heim are both very cheap. And then all these productive guys at the bottom of the lineup are super cheap. The same applies on DK, a little bit less so because Adolis is 53, Seager's 62, and Semien 58 is still relatively, I think, a little bit higher. But everybody in the lineup, way over league average for run creation this year. Their average for every single guy in this starting lineup, the average WRC plus is 133. So they are on average 33% better than average creating runs. And we're talking about an average sample of 345 plate appearances. So that is not a bad sample. It's certainly not something that I want to decide somebody's whole career on. But for what we're trying to do here, that's a relatively good sample. So yeah, these are really good players, fair prices. The matchup is fine. I wonder what their ownership is. Now I'm kind of talking myself into some shares of Texas that kind of disagree with my model a little bit. Only Adolis is drawing any kind of ownership, and that's light. Everybody else appears to be pretty low owned. Again, not my ownership, so I won't say the numbers. That is a interesting spot for the Rangers. Gets more interesting now that I know none of those guys are on, now that I looked at them option by option with those prices. That's an appealing spot. I really like the bottom end. Jankowski, a 145 WRC plus in his 173 plate appearances, 14 steals, 331, 424, 426. Quietly having a good hit tool speed kind of a year. Scores runs, gets involved. Ezekiel Duran and Leody Taveras have been great. 13 homers, 11 homers, 133, 121 WRC plus marks. Top to bottom, I love this Rangers lineup. Dodgers, it's a pretty similar, at least, let's say 1 through 6. Maybe we cut it off around Johnny DeLuca, Miguel Rojas, and Joni Hernandez. That's a little bit weak on the bottom end. Not too many plate appearances for 2 of those guys. Miguel Rojas has been pretty bad all season. Chris Taylor has been great for power this year. 12 home runs, a 253 ISO, and 196 plate appearances. 13.5% barrel rate from a guy who slots in third base or short on DK for only 3,000, 2,800 on FanDuel. Outfield third and short. Gives you quite a bit of flexibility at a cheap price in that Dodgers lineup that is very, very expensive otherwise. That's a lot of high prices. Like comparatively across teams, the Dodgers are a lot more difficult to afford. Will Smith, 5,600, 3,500. JD, 5,200, 3,900. Mookie and Freddie up at the top, 63, 61, and 42, 43. I love all those bats, but they're just more difficult to get to. But tons of home run potential, obviously. Love all these guys that are above the magic number in my home run model. All these incredible barrel rates. All the good hard hit rates. A lot of low strikeout rates for the first three guys in the lineup with Mookie, Freddie, and Will. And then you get into the 30s with these next couple guys, but there's just titanic power there with, I meant to go down to Muncy there. But Taylor's on that list too. He's got tremendous power this year. So love the opportunity for JD or Muncy to go deep despite their strikeout downside. They're affordable. Top end of the lineup is just superstars. So it's very easy to go at least 1 through 6 with the Dodgers in a variety of stacks. What are we talking here? Like to see the difference between the run difference in games with extreme hitters and extreme pitchers. Try Swish Analytics or Analytics. You can see the data. What does it say? There are umps who call 20% more strikes. There are umps who call 20% less strikeouts, more balls. What does it say about run production, et cetera, et cetera? Siege used to bring that up years ago. That's why I was wondering what Siege used to bring up. Was never a huge Siege fan. Kind of some interesting takes from what I heard back in the day. That said, it's got to be 10 years since I've heard anything he's done. So, all right, let's move on from this one. So this one is enthusiasm about bats, at least as mid-range options in stacking, and as they get less popular, I get more enthusiastic about this spot. Heaney obviously could go out and have a decent strikeout game, but there's plenty of home run potential against him. Gonsolin could have an okay game, but I don't really see it. I think there's potential for the Rangers here too. So neither pitcher really is on my board. Oh shit. I thought I had fixed Michael Soroka. I got it so that everything else was working because he's Mike in some things and Michael in some other things, but now these numbers disappeared, so apologies for that. Freddie Peralta going up against the Braves. The Braves, as nobody should be surprised by, project out at the top of the board in terms of just overall raw fantasy point projections. They're cut down a little bit compared to where they typically are in the home run model. Everybody below the magic number, but still a lot of really productive numbers there. Going up against a struggling version of Freddie Peralta, 4.41 ERA, 4.07 xFIP for Freddie this season. Still a good strikeout rate at 27.1%. Great swinging strike rate, 13.2%. But he's given up a lot more of premium contact this year. 8.9% barrels, 3.84% home runs so far. That's up from 3.5% barrels last year, 6% the year before, 1.89 and 2.41% home runs. The hard hit rate is up by about 6 points. 31.3 last year, 31.1 the year before, up to 37.5 this year. Big jump in barrels, big jump in hard hits. So I think Freddie is maybe more targetable than it might seem like he is. My model's bearing that out in terms of the fantasy point projection. These guys just project ridiculously well anyway. Like they're just so good from top to bottom and so productive this year that there's no way to stop them from projecting really well. But it's totally justified. They haven't failed these projections many times. So I love going to the Braves. I hope it renders them a little less popular than they have been on a lot of slates. There's tons and tons of upside. They have 4 guys in the lineup with at least 20 home runs, led by Matt Olson with 32 on the board. 323 ISO, 149 WRC plus for Olson. Ronald Acuna Jr. is the best player in the world, the universe, the galaxy probably at least. Maybe not the universe. There's probably baseball going on or versions thereof. How many different versions, like how many different galaxies do you think baseball's played in? There's probably an intergalactic league out there somewhere that we just don't know about. I bet it's out there. They probably didn't learn it from us. But just like, parallel thinking. Somewhere out there, somebody else developed baseball. Probably caught on. Was huge. Dennis says, for sure, is talking about home away splits. Judging it off your other takes. Ooh, shots fired in the chat. Michael Soroka, 6,900, 8,400. Does not project really well against the Brewers here. He's a talented kid, but he's been up and down over the last couple of years. And let's see, I wanted to pull the performances this year. I think it's in the article. But yeah, this year it's been 4 starts, 5 total appearances. It was 3 starts, 2 on May 29th and June 4th. Very limited. A 6-inning start, struck out 3, gave up 2 walks, 4 earned runs on 5 hits in 6 innings. Then went 3 2/3, struck out 2, walked 4, gave up 2 home runs. Has given up a home run in all but one of his appearances. He pitched in the 6th inning twice. One of them was in mid-May. Then there was like a 2-week absence. Came back on the 30th, went 6, allowed 3 earned, 2 home runs, but struck out 7 against the Marlins. Then went 4 2/3 against the Guardians and only 3 innings against the White Sox. That was despite only giving up no earned runs and 5 hits against the Guardians, striking out 4 and walking 3. Then against the White Sox, struck out 3, allowed a home run, 2 earned, but came out after 11 hitters. So I forget what happened to him in that start. I don't know if something did. I can Google that, I guess. But all of this is to say that he's not really on the board for me. Let's see. That was a month ago. I don't see anything pop up immediately here about why he came out. Apparently there's rumors that he's going to go to the bullpen. Max Fried's coming back soon. Yeah, I don't know why he came out of that one. But regardless, doesn't project well even with a full complement of innings here. If anybody knows, drop it in the chat there. But Soroka, non-priority for me. 6,900, 8,400 doesn't project all that well. Going up against a fair Brewers lineup, but not really, I wouldn't call them good by any means. A lot of mix and match pieces through this Brewers lineup. I do like Christian Yelich from the top. 10.2% barrels, 53.8% hard hits. Nice season for him so far. 402 plate appearances. I don't know that he's getting talked about enough. 14 home runs, 21 stolen bases, creating runs 32% better than average, a 193 ISO, 287, 376, 480. What's not to like about Christian Yelich? 4,900, 3,800, great pricing in the outfield on both sites. Love that player. Just really, really good player. Glad he's succeeding. Glad that everything I keep harping on about still hits the ball really, really hard is starting to come through in some of the stats. The stolen bases are still there. Sorry, just got a bunch of different pop-ups, but nothing important. So decent enough spot for the Brewers bats. If I'm looking at Brewers, it's certainly Yelich. And then they're kind of limited here. I like William Contreras. Willy Adames is good for home runs and not much else. Jesse Winker's been awful this season. Was good 2 years ago and died out in Seattle. Thought he was going to have a good year coming to Milwaukee as a lefty, but has not done anything in 188 plate appearances. Can't stay healthy. Can't produce when he is on the field. 1 home run, a .051 ISO, a 66 WRC+, 196, 319, 247. Ouch. Owen Miller is okay, has been producing, but not really a premium bat. 3,600 at first base on DK. I'd probably rather go to other spots with my first base shares. Maybe I can stick him at second base on FanDuel for 2,500. Second, third, and first base eligible on FanDuel. 88 WRC plus on the season, 5 homers, 12 steals, and okay triple slash. Tapia, Monasterio, Turang, and Joey Weimer at the bottom. Monasterio and Joey Weimer are the 2 most interesting guys down there. Monasterio is pretty cheap in the 7 spot, multi-position eligible, 3 positions on FanDuel, 2 on DK. 303, 384, 408, a 121 WRC plus, only 86 plate appearances, but has been somewhat productive. And then Weimer, 12 home runs, 11 stolen bases, 84 WRC plus, but the counting stats are there. Not great. Like I said, most of these guys are mix and match pieces. So really it's only 1 3/4 priority bats. Maybe call it 2 1/4 priority bats, maybe. It's not great. And then just a lot of mix and match pieces through the middle. So prioritize Braves top to bottom. I'm definitely going there against Freddie. I don't know that I come up with any Freddie shares. He doesn't really project particularly well for me. And the FanDuel price is comparatively kind of high with some of the other options on the board around there. It wouldn't shock me if he had a good game against the Braves, find some strikeouts, pitch some clean innings. He's a very talented pitcher and has done it over time and has a good strikeout rate this year. But he's been a lot more targetable this year, and the Braves have just been so elite. So I don't know that it's just another one of those spots, like I said before, where I just don't know that I want to tangle with the Braves on a deep slate with 11 games and similarly priced options that look better. 85 is a little bit more tenable on DK, Maybe you work him into a few more shares over there. It's a dart throw, but I think it's probably worth at least a couple shares on DK. But not that much enthusiasm about it. Probably not going to succeed. Definite enthusiasm about the Brave stack. Some interest in Brewers, a little bit top heavy. No real interest in Soroka. They're making okay time, 519. Probably going to blow through the 545 mark, but let's see what happens. We'll get there. White Sox, Twins, targetable spot for pitching. Look at those two projections. Pretty ripe, both spots. So this is a good example. $9,200 for Lance Lynn. I would just rather take that spot against the Twins than take Freddie Peralta for 94 against the Braves. It just makes sense to me. He projects out way, way better. He's a similar pitcher at worst. Good pitcher. Definitely a good pitcher. Definitely a guy I believe in over time. I know he's given up 5% home runs this year. I know he's got a 6.06 ERA, but I also know that he's got a 3.83 xFIP or 3.84 xFIP. I guess I didn't know. But definitely this is the number that I care about far more, and this looks a hell of a lot like Lance Lynn to me. So I'm not really worried about any of this stuff. Some incidental contact in here. The ERA, I never really care about ERA. I care about this, the swinging strike rate, 14%. That's up from what he's done. 27.7% strikeouts. That's fantastic. Barrels I care about, but they're a little bit high. That's what leads to the high home run rate. But when he's striking out a bunch of hitters and he only costs $9,200 against one of the highest strikeout target teams in the league, sign me up for some Lance Lynn shares, particularly when he only costs $7,600 on the DK slate. That is a major source of value on DraftKings tonight. He's going to be wildly popular in that spot, I would have to think. I haven't looked at any DraftKings ownership, but if he's not really, really popular, at least into the 20s and probably beyond for that price for this pitcher against this team, I'd be very surprised, and I would think that the field is making a mistake that you guys could go capitalize on. He might get burnt. Certainly there's power for the Twins. No, there's Byron Buxton. He's hitting 6th today. Wow. How the Byrons have fallen. 88 WRC plus on the season for Buxton. 15 home runs, but below the Mendoza line. 193, 281, 404. Ugly. 31.6% strikeouts. Ugly. Matt Wallner in the lineup today with his 21.1% strikeout rate in 38 plate appearances, helping the team out to just a 28% strikeout average. It's ridiculous. If we leave Wallner out, that goes up to 28.8. Ridiculously high strikeout team. There's certainly power threats. Eduardo Julian is a good rookie player. Carlos Correa is a star over time who's having a terrible year, but still does have a little bit of pop. 12 home runs, a 180 ISO. Julian's been like the best player in baseball over the last 3 weeks or so. Really, really good in terms of the hit tool. He's creating runs in bunches, a 250 ISO overall, 9 home runs. Really good couple of weeks here for the kid. He's a premium prospect. He's not gonna be the best player in baseball by any means, but as a cheap second baseman, you can use him in twin stacks. Hits from the left side, which is advantageous in this split against Lynn as well. Kirilloff, Kepler, Wallner, all from the left side as well. Kepler's my favorite out of that group. 2,600, 2,800 across sites, 14 home runs on the season, a 214 ISO. Guy that we know hits home runs in bunches. Bottom of the lineup, Willie Castro, Joey Gallo, playable parts. I like Gallo for all his power upside, his ability to draw a walk, get on base, maybe a little bit of correlated scoring. Still has a 109 WRC plus for all his flaws. So it's a difficult lineup, but it's a playable enough one. I would hedge off, if I got way over the top with Lance Lynn shares, I would definitely hedge off some of them by rostering a few stacks of Twins here. It's not great, but there's enough believability to the idea of the Twins going out, hitting several home runs, they getting into the White Sox bullpen. I could see the path to success with a Twins stack or two. On the other side, Joe Ryan, one of the dominant projections on the day. Not quite the top of the board, but I think he's third. 10-6 on DK, 10,000 on FanDuel. Totally worth it. No issues firing away as many shares as you want against these White Sox. They do have the 3 good power bats in the heart of the lineup. Luis Robert, Eloy Jimenez, and Jake Berger. Berger I don't fully believe in yet. I'm not completely sold on any of this. Still a 32.1% strikeout rate. I'll take that from a guy who gives me a higher walk rate, but he's only giving me 5.9. He's more Brent Rooker to me than he is Joey Gallo. And I think a lot of people out there hate Joey Gallo, so maybe not the fairest comparison in the world. 21 home runs, a 115 WRC plus. Is doing it. Will he continue doing it? I don't know. But is doing it and remains cheap, 4,100, 2,900. So you're not paying a tax for what he's already done. So I think you can buy in with Jake Berger shares. You can buy in with Lou Bob, with Eloy Jimenez. They're both premium bats that I fully believe in. Robert's priced up, but totally justifiable. 28 home runs, 10 steals, 297, 142 WRC plus. Jimenez has missed significant time yet again, but does have 12 home runs and 191 ISO. These guys are, well, Benintendi's not underperforming anymore, but a 101 WRC plus, we need a little bit more. We need a little bit more on the on base, maybe some more steals. I don't care that he doesn't hit for power. He's very cheap. You can bolt him on, but he hasn't been great. He's just been okay. Tim Anderson has been flat bad. Is up to a 52 WRC plus, has had like, if he's been a flat line through most of the season, he's had like a couple like tiny little bip, bip kind of inconsistencies on his EKG lately. Hopefully that leads to bigger spikes. Hopefully there's a heartbeat in there somewhere. But it's been really bad for Timmy this year. Jasmine Grandal, playable part. Gavin Sheets, Oscar Colas, Zach Ramillard, playable parts through the lineup for the White Sox, but not great. I greatly prefer the Joe Ryan side. 28.9% strikeouts for him, a 4.6% walk rate, 13.9% swinging, 3.74% home runs, does give up a little bit of power, 42.6% hard hits. Fly ball pitcher, so when he makes the mistakes, they tend to travel. It's one of these premium pitchers where we just take that from a fly ball pitcher who strikes out hitters at this great a clip, particularly when he doesn't walk anybody. So Joe Ryan's really, really good. I have him really high up the boards. Big expectations for Ryan in this spot. I like both pitchers better than I like either of these lineups, but I'll have a little bit of all four corners. Well, I'll have a lot of both pitchers and a little bit of the this corner and this corner in terms of the bats. 3 games to go. Shohei Ohtani is facing the Pittsburgh Pirates in a home start. Did you guys know that Shohei Ohtani is a really good pitcher in addition to being one of the best outfielders and power hitters in all of baseball? He's got 35 home runs as one of the best starting pitchers in baseball this year. That's amazing. Babe Ruth never did that while pitching 105 and a third innings of 32.2% strikeout baseball. I saw some stat. I think it was what was it? I forget what the qualifier pitching was, but it was in a very easy to reach pitching qualifier. Any season that he had even done that, Babe Ruth never hit more than 3 home runs or something. Like he was a pitcher and then he was a slugger. It wasn't ever at the same time like Ohtani is doing it. Just historic, ridiculously talented player. It sucks that you don't get him in the Angels lineup. I think that limits the upside for the Angels in terms of stacking them. There's a couple of bats I still like in there, but I'm definitely not going to get carried away. Definitely not going to build that many Angel stacks just for the lack of Ohtani, the lack of a Mike Trout also with his injury. But Ohtani on the mound is definitely a priority. One of 2 projections into the 40s today. The other one was Framber Valdez, who projects higher and who I like better. But I will have a ton of Ohtani in this spot. It's a really good matchup going up against the Pirates. 32.2% strikeouts for him, a 3.50 ERA, allowing a little bit more power this year than he did last, but not in a problematic sense. 3.24% home runs, only 86.7 miles an hour of exit velo. We're nitpicking if we're saying that he's got a problem with power. And he's going up against the Pirates lineup that there's Jack Suwinski. Reynolds and McCutchen are only like, what, lower mid-range guys against for home run upside. Carlos Santana as well. And then 2 home runs, 0, 0, 2, 0 for the rest of these guys. I know that a lot of these guys are rookies just making their first handful of plate appearances, so it's unfair to do it that way, but it's also true. It's a lineup that in a couple years, this could be a good lineup, or as soon as next year, this could be a good lineup. This top end is fine. Suwinski's their best player, 19 home runs, 7 steals, 126 WRC plus. Brian Reynolds is really their best player, but Suwinski has been their best player this year. Reynolds, kind of disappointing, 353 plate appearances, only 9 homers, 8 stolen bases, only a 102 WRC plus. McCutchen had that nice start to the year and is kind of cool, but still a decent, okay kind of hard hit rate. Doesn't cost you anything to go there if you want to roster bats against Ohtani, but in as much as, like, why do you want to throw pitchers at the Braves or the Dodgers? Why do you want to throw bats at Ohtani? It doesn't really make that much sense. If it was the Braves on the other side, I could see it. I can make the argument for it. The Dodgers on the other side, I can make the argument for it. The Pirates? Just why? It's not going to be highly owned, I guess, in that sense of if they get to Ohtani, is anybody else going to have it? I can be super contrarian. Sure, knock yourself out. It could get there. It's baseball. They're all cheap. The bats I would roster if I did that would be Suwinski, Brian Reynolds, maybe McCutchen, although there's some appeal to like the bottom of the lineup with Henry Davis, Andy Rodriguez, and Leover Peguero down there. All these guys down here are rookies. All these guys are going up against Shohei Ohtani with very limited experience at the major league level. It's dicey to roster Pirates in this spot. Angels, like I was saying, kind of limited without Ohtani in the line, with real life Ohtani there to potentially soak up some of the fantasy points that we'd be chasing by rostering Neto, Mickey Moniak, Taylor Ward, Moose, and Hunter Renfroe, maybe Matt Thaiss. Those are the guys that I would prioritize. I mean, I just named half the lineup except for the last two guys, but like those are obviously the targets in the lineup, with Moniak as probably the biggest appeal, then Hunter Renfroe in my mind. But it's not great if Ohtani's going to maybe steal some of our fantasy points because he's in the real life lineup and he's totally unavailable to us. So I just don't like going to this team in this spot. And I think Oviedo is at least a serviceable pitcher on the other side. 20.4% strikeout rate, a 4.53 ERA, 4.57 xFIP. So is basically exactly what he looks like here. No real issues with power for him. 2.32% home runs, 88.7 exit velo. Too many walks. Not great with the whip, not great with the walks, but decent depth in terms of innings pitched. Okay swinging strike rate. Okay strike thrower. Not a high-end guy, but on DK for 5,700, maybe he's worth a few darts. And if anything, I think is at least respectable enough that I don't need to go chasing Angels without Ohtani, which was the case I started out making. But maybe a few shares of Oviedo as an SP2 on DK. I don't really need him at 8,100 on FanDuel. So Ohtani, significant enthusiasm. No real enthusiasm for either one of the stacks. Maybe a little bit of Oviedo value. 2 games to go, 5:30. Look at us flying here, gang. We did get some lineups in. Let's see. We got the Athletics here, so we can talk about that one. I spoiled it before, but Framber is my top projected pitcher on the day. The model actually wanted to give him an even higher projection. It was basically saying he's going to pitch at least 8 innings today. I told it maybe he comes down a little bit and doesn't pitch 8 innings, but maybe he sees a healthy innings total and still projects out to something like this. It's a little higher than I've seen him in other places, but I'm perfectly comfortable with it against this team. One of the worst teams for run creation in all of baseball against left-handed pitching. No hitters that I'm worried about whatsoever, with one of my favorite pitchers for just limiting power potential in general, going up against such a low-end lineup when he's pitching really well with a 27.4% strikeout rate on the season, 117 and a third innings and 18 starts, 2.76 ERA, a 2.90 xFIP. The A's have a collective 72 WRC plus against left-handed pitching this season. Only team worse than that is Colorado at 68, and then the team above them is at 86. So there's a big drop off from them to everybody, or from everybody else down to Oakland. Looking at Framber's numbers, I wrote this in the article, and it's so worth repeating because I just referred to it and I talk about it constantly. I love him because I chase these low launch angles for pitchers. I think it gives them additional upside that's maybe hidden from the field in a lot of cases. With Framber, it's not. Everybody knows he's good. But I just love 3.4 degrees, 1.91% home runs. Last year, negative 3.6, 1.33. Year before, negative 5.5, 2.10%. Since the start of the 2021 season, Framber Valdez has allowed just 32 home runs. So 2021, 2022, and thus far in 2023 combined, just 32 home runs. Lance Lynn, who's on the board today, has allowed 24 home runs this year. Yusei Kikuchi has allowed 22. JP Sears on the other side of this game has allowed 21 this year. Again, Valdez has allowed just 32 since the start of the 2021 season. I had other totals in here. I think I did Kikuchi's. Since the start of the 2021 season, to spoil the Kikuchi take, Kikuchi's given up 72 home runs compared to the 32 that Valdez has given up over the same sample. Pretty significant. He's just fantastic. I am a Framber Valdez fan. I like the spot quite a bit going up against the team that we've been targeting all year. I see no real need to go to that many shares of Athletics. Couple contrarian shares is fine. Couple head shares is fine if you want to go there. Zach Geloff, Brent Rooker, JJ Bleday, Jordan Diaz maybe would be like the focus. They don't even have Soderstrom in the lineup, the premium rookie catcher that they called up. They're going with Shea Langoliers instead. Langoliers is sneaky for home run potential. He's got 10 on the season, but against Framber, there's not really much there. Very, very limited lineup, very, very limited version of this lineup. No Ryan Noda, no Soderstrom, no somebody else is missing from it too that's not leaping. Oh, Seth Brown. no Seth Brown. It's a lefty on the mound. A lot of those guys are lefties, so it makes sense. But this is a bad version of this lineup. Fire away with Fromber as much as you want. Super enthusiastic about the spot. At price, at ownership, don't really care. JP Sears, interesting value option on both sites. He projects, as you can see, fairly well. One of the top third pitching projections, and I think somewhat justified. 23.4% strikeout rate, only a 5.4% walk rate. He's gotten burnt by some home run mistakes as well. Also a fly ball pitcher and a guy who, when he makes mistakes, they're loud mistakes that travel quite a ways. But overall, pitching fairly well. 3.99 ERA, 4.91 xFIP. That's a little bit higher than I'd want it. But a 1.02 whip, doesn't really walk anybody, induces swinging strikes. Against a flawed / limited / not great version of this Astros team, I think we could get away with some JP Sears shares, particularly at 6,700 on DK. That puts him firmly on the SPT board in my mind. I think there's enough strikeout acumen. I think there's enough ability for him to hold down hitters like Corey Julks, Jainer Diaz, Martin Maldonado, Mauricio Dubon, Jeremy Pena at the top of the lineup. These guys have been bad. Dubon down to an 88 WRC plus. He was filling in nicely for Altuve very early on in the season, but has really stumbled lately. Jeremy Pena, 85 WRC plus, down to just 236, 290, 379. Bad season. Tucker's been serviceable, but not as good as he's been in previous years. 14 home runs, 17 stolen bases, a 138 WRC plus. It's unfair to even refer to that as serviceable. He's been very good, but slightly diminished from previous seasons and covering for the absence of Jordan Alvarez now. Bregman's hitting for a little bit of power, 14 homers on the season, but only a 158 ISO, only 10% better than average creating runs. Abreu has been a dumpster fire, but maybe a minor pulse over the last, month and a half or so. Up to 8 home runs, 77 WRC plus. McCormick's been good this year. 12 homers, 10 steals, 151 WRC plus. Player that I like a lot. Very cheap in the late lineup. 3,700 on DK. That's very, very cheap for him. 35 on FanDuel is borderline appropriate. He could probably be a little bit cheaper on FanDuel, maybe like 33, 32, somewhere around there. But DK, 3,700 is pretty affordable. But yeah, I don't really fear this version of the Astros lineup. Not that I have a ton of confidence in JP Sears, but given how he's pitched this year, given what we've seen from him, where he's priced, limited shares on FanDuel, but definitely interested on the DK slate at 67. So this was Fromber with a bullet, a number one option on the board, but there's some very good pitching on the board. No real interest in the A's. Only minor shares of Astros. If I go to Astros, it's Tucker, Bregman, Abreu to start. It's Tucker, Bregman, McCormick to start. And then I would probably take Abreu and maybe like Jainer Diaz, especially on DK at 44 as a catcher. Or maybe you just go to the super discount and go Maldonado. Just book your catcher position and move on. Hope you get that cheapo home run from him. But that's not a great spot by any means. So, JP Sears pitching value, Fromber pitching pricey but worth it, and limited interest in both bats. Wow, we might actually make the 545 or close to it. This one flew by. I didn't skip any games, did I? Somebody let me know. Always let me know if I've accidentally clicked too far and skipped over a game. You know me. This is goldfish memory. Trey says, Terror, in a 20 max, am I crazy to fade the Mets? Not because I love Crawford, but just because the Mets have been bad. No, you're certainly not crazy to fade the Mets. I have them, if you look at the stack board, they only rank 9th overall in terms of fantasy point projections because there are some low-end bats that maybe don't turn the lineup over later as the lineup goes on. There's no Tommy Pham now because he got hurt. So it's a good spot. I like the spot. They're showing a ton of power. I think that is a good spot, and they've got a lot of value on the stacks board, but they only rank 9th in terms of the fantasy point projection. So it's not a total mistake by any means to leave them out. That said, I would probably, if it was me, if that was my pool, I would probably want them in, just given how they look in my model. But at that point, it comes down to a personal choice. If you see good reasons, or if you have good reasons that you just saw Podegen Stoner's comment. If you've got good reasons that you want to get away from them, or if they're going to be like uber popular, which I haven't really looked at, certainly there's good opportunity to get away. Podegen Stoner says, I'm waiting for Terry who's going to hit a cycle pick. Love it. Boy, that's a difficult one. It's never the guy you would expect. It'd probably be like Elvis Andrus. See the lineup? He's not in the projected. That's the type of guy that would go out and do it. Like we would talk all, let's see if he's in the lineup. Elvis Andrus is in the lineup. Elvis Andrus 9th. Uh-oh. Cue the Elvis Andrus cycle. 2.2K. Oh, man. Already bad by any means in that White Sox lineup. Still going up against Joe Ryan. I was only screwing around, but that's the kind of guy that does like go out, hit for the miraculous cycle. Realistic guy, let's see. Ketel Marte. Ketel Marte in Cincinnati against Ben Lively. Cycle. Mark it down. Let's talk Yusei Kikuchi. As I mentioned, 72 home runs allowed since the start of the 2021 season. A 5.34% home run rate allowed this year, 90.9 miles an hour of exit velo, 10.4% barrels, 43.7% hard hits. He is a pitcher that I like to target with bats, but he is going up against the high strikeout Mariners in this spot. He is a good strikeout pitcher. There's no arguing it. 24.3% strikeouts this year with a 12.6% swinging. Last year, 27.3% with a 13.3% swinging. Year before, 24.5, 12.5. So there is upside for Yusei Kikuchi in this spot. He projects into that middle of the board. 26 points was right around some of those other mid-range options like Bryce Miller on the other side, for example. 26 points also. I think Kikuchi's in play, but I would definitely roster some hedge stacks of Mariners if I get over the top with him. And he's a pitcher that I tend to target more than I tend to use. I think he's more targetable than he is likely to put up a monster game. I think he could have a good game, but not a slate winning game in most realistic outcomes. But I think the curve would lean, in my mind, more toward the Mariners getting to him for some home run upside before it leans toward him having the monster slate winning performance. I think somebody's knocking on one of my windows, but I'm not expecting anybody. Sometimes they come for the neighbors and don't know which side of the house they live on. Hopefully that's the scenario. Anyway. Maybe that's something else. Weird. Anyway, we're near the end of the show. I can go figure out what that is in a couple minutes. So 7,700 for Kikuchi on DK in particular, I think is playable, but doesn't really also pitch deep into games. 19 starts, only 98 innings. That's not a great alignment of innings and starts. So a guy I don't really trust. I don't want to get too over the moon about the spot for Kikuchi. I'm more targeting him with some Seattle bats. My focus would be on some of the right-handed power. Really, these guys and those guys. And then Ty France is a decent bolt-on who's really underperformed this year but has been good in years past. J.P. Crawford, a good enough bolt-on if he's in the leadoff spot. Good on-base percentage, decent for run creation. But really, it's Julio, it's Eugenio, it's Teoscar, all those guys. Tommy Murphy also has right-handed pop from behind the plate, 113 plate appearances for him, 15.3% barrels this year, 19% barrels, also a small sample last year. It was only 42 plate appearances last year. There was a bigger sample for Murph. Yeah, there is. 325 plate appearances in 21. He hit 11 homers. So a guy that I do believe has realistic right-handed power, just a part-time backup catcher type, but a guy who can turn on the right pitch in the right situation here, and probably a guy who goes under-owned in this lineup. AJ Pollock has righty pop as well. He's been lousy in 135 plate appearances, but does have 5 home runs on the season and a believable track record of success as a major league hitter. 14 homers in 527 last year, 21 in 422 the year before. So AJ Pollock is another hitter that I believe in this lineup. Mouse is acting up again. Don't know what the hell goes on that causes this thing to act up. Dylan Moore, Jose Caballero, bolt-on parts if they're in the lineup. No Jared Kelenic, he went to the IL. I believe that was yesterday. So it's probably going to be Dylan Moore and then probably Caballero at the bottom. Caballero's a decent wraparound play. 351 on base, over 194 plate appearances, 104 WRC plus. Not a priority. Not a priority, but a guy with a decent little stolen base upside, guy who can wrap back around. If you wanted to skip Crawford and roster Caballero instead, you get him at the same position on the FanDuel slate. You get him in the middle infield for very, very cheap on the DK slate. So I think it's a reasonable alternative. Blue Jays stack going up against Bryce Miller. I kind of prefer the Bryce Miller side. It's kind of the opposite in this one, where I believe in the Blue Jays stack, but I believe in Bryce Miller a little bit more, and I think he's going to be a little underowned, given a 91 price on both sites. Projects out just the same as Kikuchi for me. 23.1% strikeout rate for him on the season, a 5.2 walk rate, a .97 whip. which is significant. He fits right into their mold of what they like their pitchers to do. Doesn't walk anybody, strikes out a decent handful of pitchers, pitches to clean ERAs, limits power. So I like the spot for Bryce Miller. Might not succeed. Going up against a lineup with George Springer, Bo Bichette, Brandon Belt, Vladdy Guerrero, Matt Chapman, Whit Merrifield. It's a good Toronto lineup. We know that. But I think there's enough potential for Miller here, especially if he's low owned, which will be a key in my decision point of like, if he's 1-2% owned on the FanDuel slate, do I stretch it out to like 8-10? Or if he's like 8% owned, do I decide to like double that and go to like 16 and push it that much? I would prefer the first scenario where I keep it like 10% or below, but we'll see what the field is doing. I do want to be ahead of the field on the Miller shares though. The Blue Jays side of things, their lineup's not out yet, but I do like Brandon Belt in the heart of the lineup there for only $3,200. His price keeps on, I think it's dropped over the last few weeks. He's still got a 123 WRC plus, gets on base at a 369 clip, 250, 369, 418 overall, only a 168 at ISO, but it's not like he's not barreling the ball when he connects. 11.2% barrels, 40.5% hard hits. He's a guy who hit a ton of home runs through the course of his career, is on the back end of the career now with Toronto, but there's major upside for run creation, if nothing else, for those cheap prices, and the way that he correlates with Vladdy, with Bo Bichette, with George Springer, with Matt Chapman. Whit Merrifield gives you speed, gives you a little bit of hit tool, second base and outfield eligible at cheap prices, good player for the money. Varsho gives you power, Jansen gives you power behind the plate for a cheap price, fairly low ownership, and then Kiermaier's just kind of like a bolt-on, take or leave him. Same story if you get like Santiago Espinal or somebody like that down the bottom of the lineup, just take or leave type of pieces. But priority bats are, if you're going to Blue Jays, certainly 1 through 7, 1 through 8 even, all rosterable in different spots, different prices. Good players, good lineup, but I like the spot for Miller. So ranking it out is difficult. What do I want to do? Mariners bats, Miller, Blue Jays bats, Kikuchi. How about that? Kikuchi gets a little bit stronger on DK for the value. DK maybe a slip him ahead of the bats. But I think I like the Miller spot better. It's not one, again, I'd like it if I can be significantly ahead of the field while remaining 10, 12% myself. I don't want to get overexposed to the spot, but it's a pitcher I really believe in, one of the better pitching prospects in baseball and showing good results. Let's slide across and take a look at the overall pitching board. We're going to remember to, wow, this mouse is, better not do this when I'm trying to build lineups. It's going to be a problem as I copy and paste it across. So let's all remember that we are not going to buy into this Jake Irvin projection. I'll state that off the top. Gav Williams is our more realistic guy if we wanted to call it 25-point cutoff. Let's call it 25.2 would be the cutoff so that Jake Irvin wouldn't qualify. I think Freddie Peralta is more realistic. I think Alex Wood is more realistic. Kodai Senga, Alec Marsh, Yohan Oviedo, Heaney. I would probably take Irvin and slide him down like here by Gonsolin, Lively, Soroka. Everybody else is relatively playable. Top end is great. I really like those 4 options. They project very strongly. I love the price on Lance Lynn on the DK slate. He should be filthy popular for that. You can see where JP Sears projects, though. That is a high projection for Mr. Sears. Do I have a ton of faith in it? No, but has he earned that to come through the model and not be tinkered with? Yeah, I think he has. I think he's been good enough to leave that alone. So I love the value price on him. Clark Schmidt, realistic upside going up against that terrible Royals lineup in Yankee Stadium. $8,000 on FanDuel, good price. $6,200 on DK, aggressively good price. I still like Lance Lynn against Minnesota for $76 more than I like Clark Schmidt against KC for $62, though. I think there's a higher ceiling for Lance Lynn. It's close, but it's a higher ceiling. Bryce Miller, Ranger Suarez, like both of those spots. Kikuchi, I'll take my shares of. Kind of, like grimace and swallow your medicine kind of shares with the Kikuchi spot. Kind of think you have to, but don't really want to kind of a thing. Gav Williams, I'll take some shares of for sure against Philly. Good enough pitcher to get through that lineup. Cheap enough price at $85. I like him better at $7,000 on the DK slate. So really, yes. Enthusiastically for all those guys. Yes, for sure, because it's a decent value spot. Yes, because it's an even better value spot. Yes, because I believe in the pitcher, but it's not a great matchup. Yes, because I like the spot and he's fairly cheap. Yes, because I believe in the pitcher in a bad matchup. I think I have to. I don't even want to say yes or that it's a bad pitcher in a good spot or a good pitcher in a bad spot or whatever. No. And then these guys fall into like the meh if it helps you build a lineup category. Like Marsh at 5,000 on DraftKings is certainly going to buy you a couple of bats. 7,200 on FanDuel, arguably going to do the same thing. Alex Wood, same story, 6,700, 6,000, is going to buy you some opportunity. Not in the greatest situation in the world, but because the Nationals are better against lefties. But again, like if we want to think about teams that we have a bunch of fearsome hitters on it, the Washington Nationals, despite being better against lefties, certainly don't qualify for that list. And Alex Wood is demonstrably at least league average-ish over time. There's enough potential there. I don't want to argue too passionately at the end of the show for Alex Wood and have that be the only thing that somebody remembers. But I think he's on the board for those value prices. And like I talked about at the top of the show, all you're looking for there is to unlock the hitting opportunities that more than make up the difference between, let's say, an Alex Wood game and a Clark Schmidt game, or an Alex Wood game and a JP Sears game, somebody like that. If you go to a guy that's a little bit more expensive, if you're saying like, all right, I want to use Ranger Suarez instead of a Joe Ryan share, then you got to, obviously, you're making up that difference by getting to the right bats. So it's all just relative to what you're paying for these different pitchers and what it buys you in other spots. It's the most important thing to remember is that none of it exists in a vacuum. With that in mind, 550, not bad. Kind of record time going through this size of a slate, I think. Bought myself a few extra minutes to build lineup, so hopefully that'll be good. What's going on in the chat? Anything out here? Michael Knack calling it double dong of the day. Seattle Suarez. Eugenio Suarez for the double dong from Mike Knack. I don't dislike that call. Podigen saying Tommy Murphy as the home run pick. Not bad. Did I mention Kikuchi Revenge? No, I did not. I did not. I believe he's exacted any revenge already against this team. He must have pitched against them already, right? All right, guys. I'm going to punch out of here. 551. Go build some lineups. Go build some quality stuff. Check out some of those tournaments across sites. Should be a good night of baseball. A lot of fun. Keep an eye out tomorrow. I have a full day of stuff I got to do tomorrow, so not entirely sure where we're going to land a show. I'll try and get one in. Depends on what the slate looks like, what the timing looks like on my day, but I'll do my damn best to get something in. At the very least, we'll have content up on the site and in Discord. All right, guys, I appreciate it. Monty, good job to you too, pal. Thanks to you too. Hit the like button. Thank you guys immensely for coming and hanging out here every day. It's just a blast. I just enjoy it. Hit the like button. Subscribe if you haven't. Check us out in Discord. Everything's free. See ya.